Hi, everyone. Welcome to Turn That Patch into a Plan. I am Zoe Evans. I'm a master naturalist, a rewilding coach, and a vice president at Wilder, which is the company that created the Wilder Score and the Less Lawn, More Life Challenge. Wild Ones is a very close partners of ours, and we love their team and love working with them. So it's just a pleasure to be here with them tonight. And Wild Ones also powers our Ask the Expert feature for the Less Lawn, More Life 12-week guided journey. And we'll tell you a little bit about that later. We're also building something new at Wilder, which is an app that puts a team of ecologists, designers, and rewilding coaches in your pocket. And here's the fun part, which is since you're all here to design tonight, we want you to help us design the app too. So at the very end of the workshop, you're going to get to play a quick game and tell us what features to build. So stick around, and your votes are literally going to become Wilder's roadmap. So I'm co-teaching tonight with my mom, Heather Evans from Design Your Wild. And yes, that's a lot of wilds in one room. Wild Ones, Design Your Wild, Wilder. Clearly, you're all here because you want to get a little wild. And some of you may have already started a patch of native plants or started transforming your whole yard. But tonight's is really about stepping back and envisioning a plan for your entire yard. And it's about one that fits your life and creates a healthier place for your kids, your pets, wildlife, and the planet. So now I'm thrilled to introduce my mother.
Hi, I'm Heather. I write Design Your Wild, which is a free newsletter about designing with North American native plants. We've got about 25,000 subscribers now. And if you're not on our list yet, I'd love to have you join us. Tonight is all about layout. It's where things go, how you move through your space, and what makes it feel inviting. We won't be covering plant selection or planting plans, but we'll give you some resources for that at the end. Design is the missing ingredient in so much of the rewilding movement. People know why to plant natives, but they don't know how to make it all come together. So back to you, Zoe.
Okay, so welcome everyone. We have folks from all over the country tonight. Thousands of you signed up for this workshop. So there's clearly a lot of demand. And we know that transforming your yard can feel overwhelming. There's a lot of budget, a lot of time, a lot of decisions to make. And that's why we start with layout. So once you have a plan, you can implement it over time at your own pace, one zone at a time. A couple things before we dive in. This is our housekeeping. Please grab your aerial photo or parcel map or sketch your property from memory. And this is like from above, what is your house, driveway, roughly kind of this. You want to focus on the third of an acre closest to your house if you have a larger lot. And then for tonight, as you're drawing, they're going to bring you through some exercises. Please use thick markers and not pencils. Neatness in this case really just slows you down. I have a degree in neuroscience, and we've built this workshop with a lot of learning hacks, including the exercises as well as a couple of prompts to reflect using the chat. Um, and we've packed a lot into 90 minutes. So we really hope you'll try everything, even if it feels a little awkward, because that's really where the learning happens. And we're only going to answer some of your questions live, but we'll review everything in the chat afterwards. And Heather's going to be answering many more questions in upcoming newsletters. So ask away. We really encourage you to use the chat. It's a great way to stay engaged and answer each other questions. And then keep an eye on your inbox if you choose to subscribe to the newsletter afterwards, and you can get answers to your questions. And don't worry if you miss anything we say. This is being recorded and it'll be sent in a follow-up, so you can get all the links and everything after that. Heather, please share a bit about our approach to yard transformation.
So our approach is human-centered, and that's because we want you to restore yourselves and your loved ones, and not just support wildlife. So we know from research that even a short daily walk around your yard, just 2 to 5 minutes, can improve both physical and mental health. So I take one each morning after breakfast, and I highly recommend building that kind of habit. So our goal today is to help you sketch out a layout that'll draw you and your loved ones outside. So your yard becomes a place where you actually enjoy spending time. In addition, the more time you spend in your yard, the better your steward you're going to become of nature. So I'm going to be referring throughout to work of Doug Kent at the Lyle Center for Regenerative Studies. His research explores what makes outdoor spaces truly restorative, not just beautiful or functional, but places people are drawn to. So I think it's important to be research based in this, just as we are in our ecological principles. So Kent found that plants engaging your senses and water that's audible within reach matters. But even more powerful are structures that shape how we move and feel in the space. And that's what we're focusing on today. So you'll be doing live exercises where you're actually going to sketch the features that invite people to explore, pause, and stay. Your layout will still map where you want to walk, sit, eat, and play. And everywhere else, that's where you're going to plant native plants. Okay. So you're going to be kind of creating the thinking about the plants as the negative space. So now to help you start your imagining what's possible in your space, I'm going to hand this back to Zoe, who will do a quick visualization exercise.
All right. So for this part, we're going to do just a couple of minutes of a guided visualization. That's kind of like a meditation. And the idea is that imagining is so critical here because imagining widens the options in your brain and gives you a sense of possibilities. So just roll with it, whatever comes into your mind, even if it's fragments, just go with it. So go ahead and close your eyes if that feels comfortable, or you could just soften your gaze and take a deep breath in and out. Maybe you're just arriving in your seat, transition to this space, just arrive. Before we start drawing anything, we're going to imagine it. So you're heading into the yard you want to create, not the one that's there now, but the one that's possible. So imagine you're starting at the edge of your home. Maybe you're stepping out a back door or onto a porch. There's a fragrant shrub that you placed right outside the door. You breathe it in. As you step forward, you're on some kind of path. To your left, you pass a sunny patch filled with blooms. You see movement, a butterfly lifting off, a bee dipping into a flower. You keep walking. There's a small bench tucked under a tree, just enough shade to sit with a book or watch the birds. Farther ahead, maybe there's a place to gather, a table, a couple of chairs, or even a hammock. And around the edges, you notice taller plants giving some privacy, maybe a mix of shrubs or trees. Maybe you go over and you pick a blueberry, pop it in your mouth, and you taste it. As you continue on the path around your house, you hear bird song, the rustle of leaves, maybe even water, a small bubbler fountain. You arrive back at your door feeling refreshed from nature bathing in your own backyard. Now go ahead and open your eyes. And, whatever came into your head, that's that feeling of movement, of flow, of senses. That's what we're going to help you with today is sketching a simple plan that can capture this and that you can create in your yard. So before we just jump into design, let's ground ourselves in the why behind native plants. They are the foundation of the food web. They've evolved alongside local insects, birds, and other wildlife, and many of those species can't survive without native plants. So when you plant natives, you're not just adding greenery, you're restoring the base of the food chain in your yard. As entomologist Doug Tallamy says, most of North America's terrestrial bird species, some 96%, rear their young on insects, not seeds or berries. And in most species, the majority of those insects are caterpillars or adult moths. So if we want our yards to support birds, we need caterpillars. And to support caterpillars, we need native plants. Today, we're going to show you how to design a yard that works for you and for biodiversity. And we'll be talking a lot about woody natives like shrubs and trees because these do a surprising amount of heavy lifting, both for ecology and for design. So if you already have a pollinator patch or have begun integrating native plants around your yard, that's a powerful starting point. But many of you are ready to go further. You're not just transforming one corner, you're starting to see your whole yard differently. And this workshop is here to help you step back and look at the big picture. So this process is guiding you through how to think about using the entire space. And it's really not just what you might do now, but what you're going to prioritize for next spring, next fall, or the next 5 years. So by the end, you'll have a clear first draft plan that connects your little patches that maybe you have now to a larger vision. And it's really one that you can implement over time at your own pace and with this consideration for your budget, your energy, and your goals. And as Heather said before, it's one that really sets you up to become a true steward of your land. Because the best yards aren't just full of life, they're places where you actually want to be. And that's where the design comes in. And honestly, how you arrange the plants within the space, the planting plan, is less important than the overall structure the plants are filling in, the layout. That's the negative space Heather mentioned. So, Heather's going to walk us through the layout principles of a restorative landscape and show you how to create a yard that supports both nature and you and your loved ones' health and wellness. And then we'll get into some demos, and you're going to actually put pen to paper.
Thanks, Zoe. All right, it's true. A yard full of native plants can support incredible biodiversity, but unless you want, it's a place where you actually want to spend time in it, it's not going to become part of your daily life. So that's where layout matters. And I mentioned Doug Kent's research, which shows that the features of a yard that make a yard feel welcoming and restorative aren't just about planting. They're things like paths, destinations, and a sense of enclosure. So together, these elements create what he calls a restorative landscape. And I'm going to walk you through each of these in a moment. But first, let me show you how they can completely transform a space. So here are three views of the same long, narrow yard in Scotland. On the left is a typical yard. Unless you're 4 years old, there's not much to draw you into it. And I want to note that this is a very small yard. This is probably 20 or 25 feet wide by 50 to 70 feet long. And many of you, as I saw quickly, your where you live and what kind of yards you have small yards, urban yards like this. Some of you even have balconies. You can apply these in a balcony. You just have to think a little further about how you create this sense in a balcony. The typical American yard is about a third of an acre, and many of you have that. So we're going to be addressing various sizes today. But a typical yard is often just lots of lawn, like the one on the left. There's not much to draw you into it at all. In the middle is the first stage of transforming this yard, adding paths and destinations. So for paths, the owner, and this is a DIY garden, created turf and cobblestone paths, including a loop so they can walk around the yard and not just up and back. For destinations, she added a shed at the back right. You can just barely see it on the right-hand side. Several seating areas and a fountain. So even in this small yard, she has several seating areas, and you're going to see more examples of that. The right side shows the garden fully established. You can see what I mean about how the paths and destinations draw you into the yard in a way that turf did not. By the way, I want you to notice how the tall, dense plantings also make the yard feel bigger rather than smaller. So by using tall plants to hide the wall around the outside, the owner did what's calling blurring the boundaries, as landscape designers say. And in fact, it now looks as if the trees in the yard behind are part of this property. That's what's called borrowed landscape. I'm going to come back to the concepts of blurring boundaries and borrowed landscapes later when we talk about enclosure. So this garden illustrates how paths, destinations, and enclosure come together, even in a very small yard, to create a place you want to spend time. But let's take a look at each of these one at a time. All right, you'll make the best use of your lot if you can create reasons to visit all of it and paths to take you there, preferably creating a loop around your backyard, or or if possible, around your entire house. A lawn offers infinite choices for moving through it, as you saw in the prior example, but too much choice and open space is overwhelming. And instead of drawing people into it, open lawn is often viewed from the safety of a patio. In designing an ecological landscape filled with native plants, you're going to be intentional about creating ways to move through the space, often paths, as well as destinations that will draw you into it. So for most of us, actually, I'm sorry, I was going to move ahead, but I forgot that I have something here I want to comment on this forest. So you'll see here a picture of a Rhode Island, how a Rhode Island homeowner drew visitors into a woody area. where no one else would generally go. She added a narrow, naturalistic wood chip path and a couple of rocking chairs. You'll note that this path is about 2 feet wide, which works well for an intimate subsidiary path like this one. For the main path, like the one circling your yard, 3 to 6 feet is generally a good width. So you're going to design your paths to direct you and your visitors to experience the views, both near and far, within your property and beyond, directing where you walk and what your gaze encounters. So I hope you got a sense from Zoe's visualization exercise of how that might work. So for most of us, the paths will be turf that we've already have in our yards. Instead of focusing on how we can replace turf grass completely, we focus on limiting the amount of turf to paths and destinations, and also to growing your turf more ecologically. So in regions where there's not enough rainfall to support turf without irrigation, you might choose pea gravel or other materials for your paths. If parts of your yards are inaccessible, for example, with a steep slope that nobody wants to walk up or down, you may want to add steps or a bridge. Both the cobblestone steps that you see at the left and the wood bridge at right are relatively inexpensive solutions to making unused areas of a yard more accessible. But as you saw in the example of the wood chip path in the woods, it helps to add something. In that case, it was rocking chairs to draw you down the path. And that's what I'm calling a destination. So often, the simplest sure thing destination is a place to sit. And remember, in that little yard in Scotland, there were at least 3 sitting areas. So, and same here, I'll show you this. Doug Kent found that if you have a bench at the side of a path, even if no one used it, people felt a greater sense of comfort and enjoyment in the overall space. You can fit several seating areas in even the smallest yard. And here in this small London yard designed by Stefano Marinaz, you can see a table and chairs beside the grill in the middle, a lounging area at the very back, and I believe there's also a couple of chairs in the foreground that you can't see. So I'm going to show you a case study of how we transformed a yard with nothing but a bunch of used furniture scored off of Facebook Marketplace. But first, here are some more images of ways to create comfort in your yard. All right, on the left, this is great for really a little tiny nook. Cafe tables can fit almost anywhere. In the middle, you see benches. Benches, again, create a sense that there's an opportunity to relax, even if no one uses them. And I'm a huge fan of Adirondack chairs, particularly this idea with pops of color. Kent's research also found that thermal options, sun and shade, are top 10 attributes of a restorative landscape. So try to have seating in both sunny and shady areas. And Zoe, again, touched on that in the visualization. So I love sun lounges. They really telegraph that idea of comfort. But a fire pit like this circular one is another seating area that gives a thermal option. So now you've thought about seating, but let's think about other destinations. Let's dream bigger, beyond seating. What's going to draw you into your yard? Maybe a lovely pergola or summer house like the one you see here, a shed or an office or a gym or workshop. You don't have to build these now. The idea of designing is to plan for the future. So planning prevents you from planting a tree in the ideal place for the shed that you're going to eventually build. Other possible destinations include game areas. Think badminton, basketball, bocce, croquet, volleyball, putting, cornhole, or lawn bowling, or areas where your kids or grandchildren can climb or swing or make a fort. Or a hot tub, a stock tank pool, a pond, a bubbler, a bird bath. In fact, water is necessary to a certified wildlife habitat, and water, audible and within reach, is independently another of Kent's top 10 attributes of a restorative landscape. I saw some of this going through the chat, people who want edible gardens. We see edible gardens as a destination within your overall landscape. So whether that's a few pots of herbs or a very large vegetable garden or small orchard, or a cutting garden in an area for exotic flowers grown just for cutting. These are non-native garden destinations. So I'm assuming the rest of your yard is native plants. And as Doug Tallamy's research shows, yards with about 70% vegetation, native vegetation support nesting birds. So we want to strive for 2/3 for the birds in our plantings, 2/3 native. Other plantings can be destinations too, though. One of our past students is creating a gorgeous wildflower labyrinth as a place to go and spend time. But I want you to remember that paths and destinations are places for you to stroll or sit or play. And they're going to be surrounded by plants. So, in general, you're going to think of your native plantings and the bees and butterflies they attract as the artwork along your paths and around your sitting areas. They're the walls, the wallpaper of your garden. So I like the word destination, which I've been using because it's really clear that this is a place you want to go. But sometimes it's helpful to think about your destinations as rooms. Garden rooms are a traditional design element. But what I want you to think about now is how they function, how rooms pull together elements into a sense of whole. The functional character of rooms also helps decide where features belong. So, for example, outdoor dining areas usually make the most sense outside the kitchen, the door closest to the kitchen. And you'll want the grill in that area as well for easy access. Rooms in simple, intentional shapes signal that you have arrived. And this is a really important distinction between and you'll see this in our demos, putting a pollinator patch here and there within a traditional lawn. Um, we're starting with these human spaces rather than with the flower beds. So when you start adding beds, you often end up with oddly shaped spaces between them that aren't as comfortable for human visitors. So, except for in a very small garden, outdoor rooms are generally larger than indoor ones. And for rectangles and ovals, we suggest you use the golden ratio to create especially comfortable spaces. That would be one side is about 1.6 or 1.5 times the other. So I've run through these examples very quickly, but I'm hoping they inspire you to add destinations to your yard and particularly seating. I'm just like rabid about seating. So let's take a moment to reflect and inspire each other. So in the chat, please put one or several destinations you'd like to add to your yard, or what you'll put in the farthest reach of your yard to get you and your household outside. So Zoe, would you read some of what people put in the chat?
Yeah.
There's a cut flower garden.
Garden, seating area and a memory garden. That's beautiful.
Love that.
Many reasons. Water feature for nice sound. A bocce court, fruit tree, workshop shed, fire pit seating, more seating. People are getting the seating message. A tree
How
house.
you had a bridge.
Yeah, a teenager hang out at the farthest end. Great for saying, yeah. An edible area, nothing, it's a swamp. Okay, so that's one where you might be really leaning into some wood bridges, or focus more around your house. Greenhouse with seating. Love a gym. Yes, Heather has a shed that's a whole gym in her yard. A pergola, a potting area, hideout for play. I'm the oldest of four daughters of Heather's, and so we do a lot of focus on bringing family and kids into this. Great bench to view wildflower meadow. Great thinking about that bench and the view as the destination. These are fantastic. Sensory garden, amazing. All right, keep those going because again, this is a learning this is really a learning technique or hack, and so a lot of this is to help you figure out what are the things on your list. So keep them going in there as we continue. All right. So we're doing a live demo now, and I'm actually going to be sharing. So Heather, you can talk while I get set up.
Okay. So remember how I mentioned earlier how we transformed a yard with nothing but a bunch of used furniture? Well, that isn't quite true because we also used flags and a lawnmower, but Zoe's going to actually sketch the design live. So we're going to give her a second to set up her iPad, and then we're going to show you how we transformed my daughter Lila's property, which we've shared about in the newsletter. So are you ready? Okay, so I'm going to orient you to what Zoe has up on the screen. That is a map. It's off of the county website of Lila's lot, and it's about a third of an acre, which, as I said, is the average size for an American lot. And the existing vegetation was mostly all grass and a few trees, which you see along the bottom, which was along the road on the right. Lila didn't want to spend a lot of money transforming her yard, so we decided to plan a couple of destinations focused on seeding and seed everything else to make it a native meadow. So now I'm going to walk Zoe through sketching the yard using the same steps we're going to have you do next. So, and I want to repeat that. So you're going to be doing exactly this. So pay attention to what Zoe's doing. All right, this is a topographic map that we also downloaded. And you can see that the dashed lines show slopes. There's a relatively large, it's a relatively large yard, but there's quite a few slopes, which we need to consider when we site destinations. And Lila's not going to invest in leveling any of these areas. So the rooms need to be placed on the flat areas of the yard. So Zoe, first, let's draw any hardscape areas like driveway and existing features. If you had a shed or something, you put that, but Lila doesn't. And why don't you use black for this? So you're drawing up the porch there, and the stairway down. All of this is existing, and then the driveway, and then there's two big trees. Let's put in on the property. There's one at the top that sheds a lot of shade, and then there's another where there's about half the tree. Well, it's not, didn't quite come there, but that's okay. We don't want you to erase people, so Zoe's going to model that. All right, now, Zoe, I want you to think about a circuit, a nice walk around the house, not too close to the house or the road, that covers as much of the property as is accessible. So I'm going to have you put it in when our the participants do this. We're going to ask you guys to just think about it. But Zoe's going to draw in green because this is going to be where you're going to keep paths and destinations along this. So draw a line so we can see what you're thinking. Okay. Now, Lila's house sits right on the lot line of her neighbor's property, so the circuit can't go around the whole house, but it still covers most of the yard. And Zoe, next time you go through, we're not going to go right through the middle of that tree there, but and now you can erase the line. All right. So when you go through this, all of you, you're going to think about that circuit. But what you're going to really start drawing is the destinations you're going to have. So that'll be like 3 to 5 destinations along your circuit. For Lila, she had nothing existing. So she wanted seating close to the kitchen and office, sun lounges with areas for playing lawn games, and shaded seating for hot days. So let's start making your rooms. And Zoe, you're going to use a circle, oval. You could use a square, but for Zoe's for Lila's relaxed garden, we're going to use sort of circular shapes. So start with, you did the existing destination. Now let's start with a destination at the furthest part of your circuit. There you go. So there's a flat area there at the top where Zoe's going to make it a little bigger and more oval. All right. And she's not erasing though, right? We're not allowed to erase here. Now you're going to add a shaded seating area. So under one of those trees. There you go. And then lastly, a seating area close to the house, right outside of Lila's office. There's another flat area there. Okay, great. All right. The next step is to connect your rooms with paths to create your circuit. All right. And in most cases, the path should enter or exit from a room. Sometimes it'll need to run alongside it. Let's say it's a shed or a cutting garden. But when you're creating grass paths and grass destinations, it's great to go through it. So Zoe, why don't you go ahead and draw the circuit now, starting at the driveway, going to that lawn outside her office, connecting to where she has the sun lounges, walking down to the area under the tree where she has a couple of chairs, and now across and back. All right. Voila. All right. That's a design. Okay. There are additional steps to test, refine, and add to it, but this is a great basic layout to start from. And actually, it is literally exactly what Lila did. She took one of our courses and designed this, and it worked very effectively. So, don't you agree with this is very different from what Lila started with, which was just a bunch of grass? Um, Although maybe you don't see that. So before we move on, Zoe, would you help us visualize this? Maybe you could use yellow highlighter to indicate we've got green for the turf, but let's use yellow to indicate the meadow. So Lila liked to color yellow, and we planted rudbeckia and other yellow flowers, and added some a few trees around the edges. So go ahead and fill in everywhere that's going to be planted with wildflowers. All right. So as you can see, this is a lot more than 70% of the vegetation in Lila's yard if we're only leaving those destinations. So that's great ecologically. And it's not just the footprint, because of course, when you add native plants, you're building up layers as well. So the process of starting with placing rooms is very different, as I said, from creating beds or pollinator patches. When you install patches of vegetation, the leftover turf ends up being in odd shapes, so you don't really create the feeling of a room. So in this human-centered approach, we're creating human-centered spaces within this wild yard. And these geometric spaces and clearly defined rooms communicate a sense of you have arrived, which is important to the sense of restorativeness that we've designed into the yards. So now let's stop sharing. And Zoe, why don't you tell people a little bit more about how they're going to do this?
Great. And I want to answer a couple quick questions that I see in the in the chat. So first, septic. We're going to talk about that in our next case study. And the tools. I'm literally just using the markup feature on the Photos app and an Apple Pencil. So it is as messy and simple as that. And we really highly recommend staying messy because neatness really constrains creativity. And we'll share some links for other resources after. All right. So now it's your turn, guys. So you're going to have just 5 minutes for this. And you can do this with a pen or paper or on a tablet with the markup app. And if you don't have a property photo, it's not an issue. Just do a super quick sketch of your house and yard from above, and you can always go back later and refine it to scale. Remember, be bold, use thick-tipped markers, be messy, don't bother erasing, and you cannot get this wrong. This is just a draft. You're the only one who has to see it, and you're going to get a second chance to do this in the next exercise. So just as Heather just did with me, I'm going to read the steps while you sketch, and you can follow along with me or move at your own pace. So it's going to be 5 minutes. And you're going to start by drawing in any fixed elements or existing destinations that won't move. So think your sheds, patios, driveway, mature trees, the things that you definitely don't want to move, won't be pulling out all of that. So put those in. Give you a couple, maybe 45.
And really, we're talking just the major things, because you can adjust this later on.
Yeah. Don't get too specific. This is all about visioning. All right. So again, you can do this at your own pace or follow along with me. For those who are with me, think about your circuit. So remember, this is a nice walk around your house or yard, not too close to the house or road. People tend to love to shove things up against each other. Try to give it a little space around it. And you can either lightly trace it in or just imagine it for now. If you're stuck, just pick a loop or a winding route that hits most of your usable space. You can even run through a tree like I did for now. This is a draft that you can always sketch new circuits later. All right. So next, you're going to come up with 3 to 5 new destinations that would actually get you or your people outside more. And this is why we did that whole, brainstorm exercise. So if you don't have any seating yet, start there. You want a sunny spot, a shady spot, and a spot to eat. And if you already have those, think bigger. So maybe you want that fire pit, a veggie garden, a gym zone, an art shed. the bench in a memory garden. Really think play, rest, gathering, work, and wonder. All right, so now you're going to put pen to paper. You're going to use rough shapes to sketch your rooms: circles, ovals, rectangles. Don't be precise. And remember, be a little bit bigger than you think. As Heather told me, make mine bigger. So start with the destination at the farthest edge of your circuit. So even in a small yard, a bench or a tiny table can work. So put something, this is the thing that's going to get you to the farthest area of your yard. And
You want to comment, Zoe? I saw some people had big lots like yours. We're going to do a big a lot later. But if you have like an acre and a half,
you have an acre and a half or even 10 acres, focus on that third of an area, a third of an acre around your house. That's really this immediate area that you're designing. Unless you've already designed that, you'll see in mine, like you'll add subsidiary paths that bring you into the rest of it, but we're really focused on that third of the acre. So all right, so you have the farthest edge. Now you're going to add your other destinations. So try to create at least one in the sun and one in the shade. And remember, if you're adding seating for the first time, there's some things like if it's a dining area, you want it to be kind of near the kitchen. Um, and maybe play is drawing you a little further out. So make sure you have at least 3 new destinations, maybe up to 5. All right. Um, Once you have all your destinations there, and we're pushing you on time here because this is really about speed. It is like when you're doing a life drawing in art class and you have to do like 15 drawings in a minute, or maybe it's, yes, 15 drawings in a minute. This is what we're doing here. All right, so now you're going to connect the rooms with paths to complete your circuit. So you kind of imagined this earlier. The path, and as Heather said, the path should generally enter and exit each room, or if it's a structure, it runs alongside. But this is this idea that the path is bringing you into the center of a room. And you've got 1 more minute to complete this exercise. And remember, this is all iterative. It's all about just doing this rapidly and over again. All right. Time is rough. 15 more seconds. And all right, time's up. Pens down. All right, you just made your first layout. Looking at your plan, imagine how everything that's not a destination or a path is going to get planted with native plants. Now, when after this workshop, you can spend more time with this. You can add more destinations, right? But really thinking about this as the negative space is where you're planting. And we're going to give you a chance to do another version in a bit. And then later, we're going to recommend getting outside to walk it and see how it feels in real life. So, to test layouts on the ground, we use landscape flags to mark paths and destinations. So, you can see here how at my sister Lila's house, we marked the path along the back of the house with a single row of flags. And initially, this path was closer to the house. It was more to the left of this image. But once we marked it out, it felt too cramped with the house. So we moved it further back into the yard. Once we were happy with the location of the flags, we mowed a path about 2 lawnmowers wide. As Heather mentioned earlier, you typically want your primary paths to be about, 3 to 6 feet wide. And your subsidiary paths, the smaller ones that go off of it, will be about 2 feet. And this is because you really want people to know where they should go. Again, a lawn is infinite choices. You have no idea where to go. I never walk off my porch into a lawn if I don't know why I'm going there. So this is a psychological indication of where you're leading people. So with Lila's yard in just 1 weekend, we laid out and mowed all the paths and destinations that you saw in my sketch. And then the following weekend, we planted a flat of black-eyed Susan plugs into the meadow areas. And then that fall, we seeded a native meadow mix. We subsequently replaced the chain link fence that you see in the very back behind that maple with a row of wax myrtles, and we added several more shrubs and trees to create a greater sense of enclosure, which we're going to talk about later. And then we added furniture. And we scored this for cheap on Facebook Marketplace, including some chairs under this tree facing the path. And the result was this delightful place where Lila spends time working, sunning, and hanging out with friends. And you're going to notice that in this slide says in your yard. There are going to be a couple more of these throughout the workshop. So pay special attention to these slides because these are the steps that you'll do on your own time to test and refine your designs. So remember, make these steps, make a note, or just watch the recording again after. So I'm now going to present another case study to introduce some design concepts for you to apply in your next sketch. And those are views, scales, and regulating lines. So Americans spend only 8% of our time outside on average, and much of that time is spent walking between a car and a building. Views of our gardens make our time inside the house more enjoyable, but they also serve to draw us outside into the garden. So, design, as hopefully you've realized, is all about intentionality. And what we want you to take away from this discussion of views and focal points is that objects and key plants in your landscape are most effective when you place them somewhere for a purpose. We don't just put ornaments anywhere willy nilly. So, one way of designing views into our landscapes is by centering a path, tree, or seating on a window. Like you can see in this image, that path centered on the window actually psychologically draws you outside. You don't want to hang out inside the house anymore. So, as we go into the next case study and sketch exercise, consider what the inside outside integrated experience that you're creating is. All right. In addition to views, scale is critical to good design, and that's making sure that spaces feel right. It's not an open expanse of lawn that feels unenclosed or a tiny area where you can't actually access the seating or do the intended activities. A lot of scale is figured out on the ground with flags and furniture testing. We talked about the flags and we'll talk about furniture testing. And the last piece here, the last kind of technique is regulating lines. So, regulating lines are a tool that we use to figure out where to place our destinations. And in this next demo, you'll see how I used both views and regulating lines in siting or locating the paths and destinations in my own yard. We'll explain what regulating lines are as we do them because they don't necessarily make sense in a vacuum. So I'm going to pull up my iPad again as Heather tells you what we're going to do.
All right, so we're going to do this another demo, and then we're going to give you another chance to do the basic layout. And for those of you, by the way, who didn't have a lot map, you can just sketch that now so that you're ready to do the second exercise, which is really the same thing over again using these additional tools. All right, so Zoe's got this is her own lot. This was a drone photograph that she had taken. So I'm going to walk Zoe through the same steps that you're going to do in the next exercise. And it's similar to what we did in the demo of Lila's yard, but we're going to be using regulating lines and views. So step one, Zoe, would you please draw lines extending from each wall of your house and from each of your doors? And she's going to draw them as far as she can until she hits a hill or some feature or until she's off of her own property.
So here I'm stopping these back lines. This one that I'm stopping right there because there's a slope there. So I don't really, it doesn't really usable, which is why I'm stopping it there. And over here, this way, there were some trees.
All right, and then the lines around your front door, so that there is a path that exists, but these door lines are important because they establish human scale. It's sort of a shortcut way to know what the scale of your drawing is. The regulating lines, the other lines, help you size and site your destinations in proportion to your house. So those simply extending the lines of your house as far as you can within your lot gives you these spaces. And because you can't see around the corners of your house, these lines essentially divide your yard into natural rooms where you might site destinations. Gives you so you don't have all your destinations within one view. So those of you with narrow urban backyards where the house extends from one side of the yard to the other, you can extend lines from the edges of your first floor windows and doors to create regulating lines. That just gives you a kind of a grid to give you a sense of the size of your house and the scale of your house. Now, step two, Zoe, I want you to indicate 2 or 3 key views with an X about 15 feet from the windows. And note that the location of the X is arbitrary. So it's just to remind you to think about that view.
The first one I
So
put
it
is
would
my dining room. This back one is my living room, and then here is kind of the view from my bedroom. I have a corner window.
Okay. And Zoe, would you just explain what the problem was in the with the existing backyard view?
Yeah, so this one, my view from my living room and kitchen. I had a dog run, which I'm going to draw in the lines here, and I'm going to erase, but just to show you something, there was an existing dog run here. Now, my view looks right out at that. And so I'd be sitting in my living room looking into a fence, and there's really nothing more inviting or disinviting, rather less inviting than looking into a fence. And so one of my goals here was to move that fence. I still wanted a space for dogs, but I wanted to make it smaller so that I wasn't looking directly into that fence.
Okay. So the next instruction is related to that because it's to sketch existing hardscaping outbuildings and destinations, but only the things you're going to keep. So we already added her front path, and she's not going to draw the existing patio. Shall we show where that is? Because she wanted a much larger entertaining area.
So this was the existing patio. It was tiny, barely even big enough for 6 chairs around a table. And again, it kind of shows how people smush things up against the house. So you'll see where I decide to put my new patio. But I am going to close off the rest of this dog run. I end up moving this line so that I'm not looking right at it from my living room.
All right. And then I know we've had a question about septic. So would you mark your septic area and explain your thoughts?
Yeah. So septic, for those of you on septic, septic areas generally, you want to reduce foot traffic on them. And you want to make sure you're not planting woody plants on it or plants that are particularly drought tolerant because their roots are going to seek out water, and so that's when you get the roots going into your septic leach field and distribution system. So for me, I knew that I wanted people to go around my septic field and I wanted to plant it with some septic friendly mix. And there's tons of great resources online, pre made mixes for septic. I think I got mine from like maybe Prairie Moon, and you just look for septic safe mix and it can tell you species that do well if you don't want to do the whole mix.
And we're not going to talk too much about other things. Eventually, you're going to work into your plan, though, things like, where are your gas lines? Where do electric lines run overhead and so on? I'll come back to that in a while, but you at some point would call before you'd ever build any of this, you call 811 and have your utilities mapped and so on. But we're going to assume a lot of you know where that is already and are sort of building that instinctively into what you're doing. So on step 4, Zoe, you're going to imagine your circuit, a nice walk around your house, not too close to the house or the road. So Zoe, would you start from the driveway and draw a circuit past the front door and around your house? And unlike Lila, Zoe can stroll around her entire house. In fact, Zoe has an acre and a half, so she's going to draw her circuit around the current open area of the house, which is maybe a third of the acre. And then we'll talk later about how she created subsidiary paths to additional destinations. All right. Now I think you should, we're going to ask people to think about that path. So Zoe erased it because she's going to start by sketching your rooms, and usually a circle or a square or golden ratio oval or rectangle to start with. So Zoe, start by putting a destination at the farthest edge of your circuit.
Okay, I want to comment while I do this though, which is the value if you're able to get an aerial shot of your yard. Sometimes it reveals things about the land already. So my farthest destination on my circuit, right? If I'm starting at my driveway, there is back here in the corner, and you can see maybe, oops, it's a little too big. That it's kind of curved already. And so I decided to do a circular destination, and I wanted to do a pretty big turf lawn. And this is because one of my many hobbies is archery. And so I wanted something, I decided 50 foot diameter circle so that I could practice archery. And so that became my first destination, and that's still pretty sizable. But you'll see by the end of this, everything around my house when I got it was lawn or invasives. You'll see how much that gets reduced at the end of this.
All right. And as I mentioned, Zoe wanted a large entertaining area. So she wanted seating for at least 8 people around a fire pit, and the similarly number around the dining table. She wanted a grill and a hot tub, just a large entertaining room. So Zoe, tell us about how the patio relates to the regulating lines and the view.
Well, first thing on regulating lines, you can see how I cited that big circular play area, which is going to be grass between those two lines. As Heather said, you can't really see around a corner. So it creates this sense of surprise, which we'll talk about later. For the patio itself, I knew I wanted it to be pretty big. And thinking about what and I also wanted it to reflect the style of my house, which is mid-century modern. So I decided to use a kidney shape that's got kind of an organic feel. And to figure out how big that should be, I used the golden ratio that Heather mentioned earlier. So this line here, this one here, that's about 20 feet. And 1.6 times 20 is roughly 30. It's like, 1.5 times 20. So I decided to do a 20 by 30-foot patio in a kidney shape. And I ended up walking this many, many times with a can of spray paint to figure out and flags to figure out the exact shape. But this is kind of roughly where I ended up. I'm going to draw it in now in this yellow, which unfortunately is very light. Heather and I have some conversations about this color.
So that, yeah, Zoe saw doing it in yellow because she decided to make her patio pea gravel, which is permeable, cost effective, fairly sustainable material, and that worked well for the patio.
I'm using the erase because I don't know how to freehand draw a kidney shape. But anyways, guys.
All right, we get the idea.
Okay. So that's a patio. I mean, that's pea gravel. I also used pea gravel for strong tool for the path to the back door, and also for this path that runs under the side of my house to connect the back door to the driveway.
So Zoe, but we want to talk about the other destinations. So in the front yard, essentially the seating is your stoop, right in front of your door.
Yep.
And then you also put some destinations further afield from your planned circuit. But one of them is a yoga platform on the hillside. So you could do that in yellow, again, to show that it's hardscape. There's a future shed near the road. And then a secret fire pit up the hill.
Okay.
All right. Now, finally, Zoe, I want you to connect your rooms with paths to create your circuit. And start with the main circuit and then add the secondary paths.
Okay, and I'm doing it in green because I decided to keep this as turf grass because turf is really nice to walk on, and when used sparingly, and combined with native plants, is totally fine. So it goes around there, connects to my patio, and it connects to that pea gravel path. And then I had some additional kind of subsidiary paths. One here running up the side of the dog run to my little secret fire pit area here up here on this hill. I have another path that kind of winds up that's much too big, sorry. That kind of winds up this hill. I told you that was quite sloped up to the yoga platform. And then over here, this branches off and leads me to whatever the structure is that I'm going to make eventually. And then, I mentioned that my property is 1.5 acres. And so I have a whole bunch of woods and I've created a trail system through it. So I took this path and split it off, and that goes into a subsidiary path up into the woods that goes to my trail system.
So, Zoe, I think we're running behind. So, I'm not going to have you color in all the rest of your lot. The back part of Zoe's lot that you see here and further back was already wooded, although there's a lot of invasives in there that she's taking out. But everywhere that's not green or this ochre color, she planted with native plants. A lot of them are purple, which is why she's using purple. She had kind of a purple and white color, dominant color pattern or scheme. But Zoe, I'm going to cut you off because we're going to move on because it's now everyone else's turn.
Right.
All right. So
All right.
Be ready. Get your pens or your iPads, and let's start doing the exercise. So just like with Zoe's, I'm going to talk you through the steps, but you remember you can go at your own pace. And remember to be quick, messy, and not to erase. All right, you're going to start with a fresh copy of the aerial view or lot map that you've got, or just the sketch that you made. And you've only got 5 minutes. So are you ready? All right. First, add regulating lines. So remember, these are just lines that extend from the exterior walls and the main doors of your house. Generally, unless you've got a path from the main doors existing, that would just go straight out from the door. And it's really to give you a sense of what's the width of the door. You'll probably, if you do it on either side, you have about 3 to 4 feet, and that'll give you a sense of how big your paths should be. All right. Now indicate the key views, and you may have, in the end, you might want to do a lot of views and make sure that all your views really make you love the way you look at your yard and draw you out. But right now, I just want you to do 2 or 3 and mark an X about 15 feet from the windows. And you'll see in the next exercise, we're going to really work with those views. Um, Third, roughly sketch existing hardscaping. So we're talking about outbuildings, your driveway, and other major destinations that you plan to keep. All right, now think about your circuit. Okay, what's that walk you're going to do around your yard? And again, if you have a huge yard, you want to make a walk around your house, not too close to the house, not too close to the road, just a nice daily stroll. And think you did this before, so do the regulating lines or the views suggest any changes to where you put your paths and your circuit? All right, so you imagined that. So now I want you to sketch your destinations. But this time you're going to move them or enlarge them based on the regulating lines and to maximize your views. So remember to include one at the far edge of your circuit and seating options in both sun and shade. All right, the last step is to connect your rooms with paths to create your circuit. And what do we got? A minute or two more? All right, I think we're there. So are we there?
Yes, I'm here. All
I
right.
know, I mean, is the timing there?
We've got about 30 more seconds. Uh, we'll let folks go just a little bit longer. Um, and we're going to, there's one more exercise in today's workshop. So you'll be returning to one of your first things. And in the last 2 seconds, I'll answer a mosquito question. Best thing for mosquitoes is probably the mosquito bucket challenge. Check out Homegrown National Park. And making sure any water you have or water features has some movement to it. Okay.
We've got some resources on Design Your Wild about that too, if you just look at the archive and look at mosquito.
Yep.
But
And
all right, hands down.
yes, and we'll talk about noise in our next case study. So, sorry, go ahead, Heather.
All right. So as Zoe mentioned, in this after this workshop, we're going to encourage you to test your preliminary designs with landscape flags and address them on the ground. So another great way to test your design is actually to bring a chair outside with you. Or if you already have some outdoor furniture and you're up for moving it, like Zoe did here on the left, you can do that as well. This was helpful because she first put the couch facing away from the window, as you can see in the photo there. But as you can see on the right, having your sofa face the window is much more inviting in terms of drawing you out in the yard. So you can also mark your paths and then walk them many, many times from both directions, noting where your eyes fall and how it feels. So, considering where your eyes fall as you walk along the paths or sit in your different seating options, like what do you see that's pleasing? I mentioned to Zoe that there's a new nature center here, and they just put in 2 benches, and they face the air conditioning unit, the heat pump. And I'm thinking, like, who did not think about this? So think as you walk, what do you see that's unattractive and how could you hide that with foliage or just adjusting the way the path moves or seating location? And when you're testing on the ground, you're going to be adjusting your layout to accommodate other existing features of your landscape. So hose bibs and gas lines and existing plantings that you want to keep. So these are both pictures of the same path at Zoe's that leads to her patio. And I just want you to see how different it feels when you approach from one direction or the other. So that's why it's so important to walk your paths in both directions. All right, so your last exercise is going to be to add to one of your sketches, whichever one you like more, incorporating as many trees and shrubs as possible. So if you've been reading my newsletter, you know I think everyone should add more trees and shrubs to their yard. Woody plants create privacy, they blur edges, they divide the space into room, they borrow views, create shade, act as focal points, and create pause and surprise. Plus, they tend to contribute more biodiversity than forbs. As an example, I was just looking it up today. The number one woody plant is an oak, and it it's the host plant for some 900 species of caterpillar across the country, whereas the top wildflower is goldenrod, and it only hosts 130 or so. So big difference. So most importantly, in terms of design, trees and shrubs create a sense of enclosure. And in Kent's research, enclosure is actually number one among attributes of a restorative landscape. So this shouldn't be surprising because the root of the word garden is the same as the root of the word guard. Gardens were created as refuges. So Kent describes enclosures as encapsulating while revealing the immediate surroundings. In other words, you want a little perspective so you can see if something's coming at you, but you also want a feeling of closeness and security. So many of you have small gardens, and those I really feel strongly can be some of the best gardens. People tend to underplant them, though, because sometimes in both interiors and gardens, we assume that openness will make a space feel more comfortable. But it's often really the reverse. You can see that this small garden is packed with elements: a bench, a reflecting pool, stone paving, and lots of lush vegetation. And it looks like a cool, delightful place to stroll or sit. In contrast, the way American suburbs have been developed, um, we often have big swaths of lawn without any enclosure that leave people feeling exposed. And to create privacy, many people surround their yard with fences. But fences can often make you feel more closed in than enclosed. That's why in really well-designed gardens, fences are often hidden and covered with greenery, with shrubs and vines and trees in front of them. So even though you're losing some of the square footage, you're gaining a sense of soft enclosure. So personally, I love a privacy hedge in the front yard, either a trimmed hedge or a tapestry hedge like the one on the left that I photographed in England. Soon we'll show you how Zoe planted a mixed hedge along the road in front of her house to create privacy from the road. The yard on the right is another example of a long, narrow urban garden where the walls are covered with greenery here, providing a sense of enclosure. The plants also divide what could feel like a bowling alley into well proportioned squares and rectangles, each with seating. So you see, again, we have three in a fairly small yard, we have three seating areas, and you could fit that many in a much smaller yard. There's the spun fiberglass chairs and table in the foreground overlooking the pond, an Adirondack chair facing us in the midground, and a table and chairs that are barely visible behind the trees. So, using plants to divide a space illustrates the next concept, which is called pause. So, pause or meditation or surprise is another aspect of traditional landscape design that's supported by Kent's research. One way to create surprise is in the transition between two enclosed spaces, just as you saw on the prior drawing and you see right here. The transition can give you a little moment of wow, either because the divider stops you in your tracks or because the focal point on the far side hints at a surprise in store for you on the other side. You can create wow moments with other garden features like sculpture or water features, for example. But for today, I'd like you to think mostly about how you're going to use shrubs and trees to separate your garden rooms. And by the way, even a little balcony should have a small multi stem tree. So this creates pause between rooms and is another way to make your yard feel larger. And here you see a perfect example. These small multi-stem trees, these are Amelanchier, are a fantastic design element. So this is the same garden I showed you earlier. It's an award-winning London garden by Stefano Marinaz. And I want you to look at now is how he used these trees, these Amelanchier trees, as well as log walls to divide the long, narrow yard into separate rooms. Avalanches and log walls also illustrate effective use of repetition in design. So he has sort of this dividing in three using a log wall and the avalanches several times. Repeating elements unite your yard. The goal is to balance this kind of unity and surprise, but that's a topic for another workshop. Note also, though, how Marinaz covered the side fence with vines and then also trees clipped so that they branch above the fence, a technique called pleaching, to add a sense of enclosure while blurring the boundaries. So now you're going to put some of these elements in your own yards, but first we're going to show how Zoe did it on hers. So Zoe, are you ready for your final exercise?
I am ready.
Okay, pull up the drawing that you did in the last exercise.
All right.
All right, so for the last exercise, you're going to add shrubs and trees to create enclosure, pause, and views. And for our demo, we're going to use Zoe's lot again, starting with the rough layout that she created just a little while ago. Let's mark these in white so that we can see what they look like against that dark background. So remember, everyone, the green is what's left of the turf. And the purple is planted with native plants, and the ochre is hardscaping. So, Zoe, I'd like you to start with areas that need privacy, a sense of enclosure. The big area was all along the front of Zoe's house, which is fairly close to the road. So, Zoe, would you use squiggles to indicate the tapestry hedge of shrubs that you planted? And tell us about some of what's in that hedge.
Yep, tapestry means that it's a mix of things. So I did bayberry, gray dogwood, winterberry, and I continued that all the way here to the edge of the house. And then the septic area was going to be a wildflower meadow, which is quite wild. So I decided at this point to swap to a formal row of the smooth hydrangea, which is a native hydrangea. And somebody asked about noise. Planting shrubs between me and the road has really helped reduce noise. And Heather has an article on the decibel reduction, actually research-based decibel reduction of using vegetation to reduce noise. And the other thing is that I did a pretty formal, like not too wild front yard because there's this idea of the yard, the garden curtsying to the house. And so my front yard has that curb appeal of being pretty tidy and ordered, whereas in the back and people can't really see from the road is a lot more kind of wild. All right.
And actually, we'll show people a picture later so they can see what you mean by that. Um, So, let's see. Another thing, Zoe, you wanted where you wanted privacy was in the patio in the back. To make it really private, you wanted to block the view from the driveway so that people couldn't see people in the hot tub and so on. So it's kind of small here, but why don't you draw those shrubs in?
Yes. So, right here, oops, sorry. I did a bunch of 3 gray dogwoods. So that was some repetition of what's in the front in the back.
Yeah, we love repeating things. So you're unifying your yard by repeating these plants. Now let's see some shrubs for screening. So screening the view within the yard. So between the back of the house and the patio, why don't you add some shrubs to hide your AC unit, your hose bib, and so on from the patio?
So here I put elderberry, blueberry, which were some edibles that I wanted, and I also did some viburnums and oak leaf hydrangea. Uh,
All right, now,
that area.
okay. And add some shrubs and vines, or what did you do to hide the dog run from the patio?
I used Native American wisteria and grew that up along the fence here.
Okay. And let's have some pause now. So to further define your room. So your patio and your games lawn actually abut each other along that regulating line. Can you make them more separate so there's a sense of pause moving between them? Why don't you add
I
shrubs on either side?
I used oak leaf hydrangea and nine bark there, and then repeated nine bark and some elderberry over here. And I have more shrubs than this, but it really separates those spaces.
All right. And that created like a doorway between the patio and the play lawn. All right. So another aspect of pause was defining the entry to your property by putting dogwoods on either side of your driveway. Would you put a circle with a plus sign in the middle to indicate where you put the dogwoods? Okay. All right, now lastly, let's add some shrubs to improve the view. You already significantly improved the view from the front windows when you added the tapestry hedge along the road, and you improved the back view by moving the dog run fence and centering your seating on it. How else did you use shrubs and trees to improve the views? Let's focus first on the view from your kitchen and living room.
So I wanted some winter interest. So I put a row of red osier dogwood here, which has fantastic red bark in spring and it grows pretty fast. Somebody asked about fast growing shrubs. And I also did 2 eastern redbud trees here so that I could have some spring interest.
And that actually the red buds give that sense of pause also and as you walking up that path to what will be the yoga platform.
And then I put a witch hazel shrub over here, which is a view from my office where I am in now, and it has fantastic fall colors as well. And then I have not drawn all of my shrubs and trees on here, guys, because it has become my like favorite shrubs in particular are absolutely my obsession and they're going everywhere and I keep coming up with more places I want them. And so you're not seeing everything on here, but these were really the key architectural and structural pieces that we put in place very early on. And now I'm just kind of adding to it. But you can see how having the structure gives me a really good sense of like where I might put new things and how I can create more surprise.
All right. So now everyone, you're going to do what Zoe just did. All right, and you're going to have just 5 minutes. And just as I did with Zoe, I'm going to read instructions while you sketch. And so you can go at your own pace or my pace. The instructions are up here on the slide. But first, pick your favorite of your 2 earlier sketches. Now you're going to add shrubs, which will be squiggles, and trees, which will be a circle with a plus sign, to add first enclosure or privacy. So you saw how Zoe just squiggled like this to show her hedge. So where can you feel more private in your yard? And next, let's add shrubs or trees to create screening. So, for example, to hide unattractive views. And I would put along your fence. I mean, I'm doing this right now in a new property where I have never had a fenced backyard before, but it is hard to think that I'm going to put all these shrubs and I'm going to lose, 5 or 6 feet of square footage, but I'm going to cover everything so you don't see any fence at all from the inside. All right. Next, I want you to create pause or surprise. So that might be putting a shrub or an evergreen on either side of a path where a path turns so that when you come around it, you have a completely new vista, or transitions between rooms, like Zoe put between her sunning and games lawn and her patio. All right. And then I want you to think about the views from inside that could use a green focal point, like the uh, Corniceracea, the red twig dogwoods that Zoe put up along the hill, and um, the eastern redbuds. Um,
Okay, I'd say about 30 seconds left. All right.
all right, time's up, pens down. Woohoo! You did it.
All right, great job, guys. And we also got fantastic questions in the chat. We'll answer them in an upcoming newsletter, but also take a moment to search Design Your Wild's archive because a lot of these topics we've already hit on. And you can submit new questions in the comments too. So if you did the exercises, you've now got a preliminary layout. So congratulations. And really important, remember that you cannot mess this up. This is a draft and it's only you that needs to understand it right now, or maybe ever if you're not handing this off to a landscape designer. And we moved very quickly and you took in a lot. So I'm going to give you a quick recap of the key ideas that you experimented with today. So you worked with 7 out of the 10 restorative landscape attributes. Remember, these aren't guaranteed just by planting natives. They make your yard feel good to be in. And if you're wondering about the other 3 restorative attributes, those are about senses, sound, and water, and they really show up when you plant more natives and add water features. You also used 7 traditional design principles. So, blurring boundaries, borrowed views, the golden ratio. Remember, that's multiplying by just 1.5 to figure out a rectangle or oval. Screening, regulating lines, symmetry, and then repetition and unity. And you'll work with those again as you revise your plan. So we're going to encourage all of you to play with this, do that kind of rapid fire, continue drawing, continue iterating, because this is something you get to bring with you for life. You get to keep working on this. So, how does all this come together and actually help you transform your yard? So, think back to the sketch you just made. You picked destinations, you drew paths, you started to see your yard as a whole instead of a collection of patches. And that's huge. That's a mindset shift. So, after today, you've got the tools to turn that sketch into a real plan. And more importantly, you know how to keep going without getting overwhelmed. So, most people start with perennials, and that's
So I'm going to interrupt for 1 second just on that. When you say real plan, your plans don't ever have to look very fancy because some people ask us, what programs do you recommend? And I feel that these programs can often make it, the existing ones can often make it clunky. So you can really have a very rough sketch, but we hope you'll just keep iterating as you practice on the ground and as you rethink and you notice things and you get your 811 call finished and so on. So sorry, Zoe, continue.
Okay. So, yeah, so this rewilding of your whole yard is a plan that shows where everything fits in. It's people, plants, and all. And it doesn't need to look formal like these beautiful ones. So, these images are actually from Wild Ones' native garden design for Dallas Fort Worth, and they show the steps for creating a full yard plan. I'll mention the garden design tool in a second, but it's a great resource for plant lists. But so this is how a plan breaks down. So you start with your overall layout where you'll walk, sit, eat, rest, and how you'll shape your movement, the circuit, the paths. Then you define your planting zones. So a zone might be defined by function, like my privacy hedge or views, or it could be defined by condition. So where is it sunny, shady, or moist, like my sunny wildflower meadow over my septic. And that'll help you decide what types of native plants fit best in each area. Then, three, for each zone, you'll choose your woody plants. So, these are your trees and shrubs, and they create structure, screening, and focal points. And then lastly, you choose your perennials and grasses, and these fill in each zone. They bring the seasonal color, the texture, the habitat. They provide that nectar, the food. The trees and shrubs are providing that host plant. They support the full life cycle of insects. So this step-by-step structure is what makes it possible to move forward. So even if you're just doing one zone or one planting bed or 5 plants at a time, you start here. And the best part is that you're allowed to change your mind. You can move plants. You'll revise your layout. And that's not failure, that's part of the design process. And the more you work with and adapt your plan, the more you'll feel comfortable making changes, knowing that you're taking into account all of these important pieces because you've already thought about them. So, this framework lets you make intentional decisions and even break the rules when it serves your vision because you understand how the pieces work together. Which brings me to something one of our favorite troublemakers once said, which is know the rules well so you can break them effectively, the Dalai Lama the 14th. So, by now, you've got a handle on the core pieces of a great layout, what makes a space feel inviting, what gives it structure, and how to connect it all. And that means that you can start experimenting with confidence, knowing what will support people, wildlife, and your long term vision. And if you're feeling excited, but also a little overwhelmed, like, okay, but how do I actually start? Once you've got a solid sense of your overall layout and you feel good about one section, it's time to start planting. Let's just get some plants in the ground. So remember, everything that's not a path or destination in your layout will eventually be planted. So for today, you might still focus on just one patch, but now you've got a bigger plan, so you'll know what to tackle this spring and next year or even later. So this is what it looked like when I started one zone at a time. On the left is my woodland garden in spring. That's that kind of more formal, less wild in the front of my yard, kind of curb appeal. And then on the right is the view from my bedroom. So there's a native mint border surrounding my lawn. And of those of you in tick areas, search our archive because we have this tick border, this anti-tick border is made out of native mints, and we have a whole article about that. And then you can see a little bit of the meadow over the septic area on the right there. But this didn't happen all at once, and that's the point. You start with one zone and then you build as you go. And the process can be fun, it's beautiful, and it's totally doable, especially with the right kind of support. So I'll talk about a few more resources in a moment, but before we do, this is a reinforcing your learning moment. We'd like you to reflect on today's workshop in the chat. So, would you please write one thing you learned in this workshop or more than one? And remember, these don't have to be full sentences. This is just helping you remember. The idea of planning the views from the windows. Yes, destinations and rooms. Fantastic. Overall plan for a whole space. Process is integral to good design and the importance of paths. Um, Pause. I've been so
Exploring boundaries.
at this one, I've been so focused on nature that I forgot to consider how it works for me. Remember, you are a better steward if you are out there in your yard. Um, Great, fantastic work implementing over time. Yeah, we can't do this all at once, and nor should we. Like, let's take time. It's really fun, and this is like such a joy in my life. Not putting the plant choices first, revolutionary, totally. Um, 4 stages of creating the plan. These are all
Unifying with repetition.
great. All right, keep those going while we finish up. So the to keep your momentum going, you're going to refine your layout and test it out on the ground, walk it, mark it, move things. Even though it's cold outside, if there's not feet of snow on the ground, you can be out there experimenting with that circuit. I mean, use your windows, look at winter views. So such a good time. And remember, winter is the time to plan because then you're ready to plant in the spring. You can map your planting zones and decide which ones to prioritize. Maybe that's based on privacy or visual impact or solving functional challenges, like where to place a rain garden for that soggy spot. And start with just one zone. And then for planting plan ideas, plant lists, check out Wild One's native garden designs. These are fantastic. It's such a great starting point for seeing what plants work together. You can look at those all across the country for thinking about how to arrange them, and then also to discover plant combinations for your region and your conditions. And then you can sign up for Heather's free newsletter at designyourwild.com, and we'll be answering a lot of your questions there over the next a couple weeks and months. And for week by week guidance, really focused on like a lot of the ecological maintenance and learning just kind of about some of these foundational things about doing ecological landscaping. You can join Wilder's free challenge at lesslawnmorelife.com, and you'll get access to Wild One's Ask the Expert, where you can just ask your own questions, and it's fantastic. Um, and if you're looking for more, we're creating something new and we need your help. So I talked about this briefly at the beginning. We're building a tool for you. It's going to be an ecologist, a designer, a coach, and your neighbors in your pocket. But the thing is, we want to build it with you instead of just telling you what you need. So pull out your phone. It's a quick game. Take a picture of this QR code, or I think Sarah will probably put the link in chat. And this is just, there are 9 features and you're going to pick your favorites. It takes 2 minutes and your votes are literally going to decide what we build. And this is coming in the spring. And so we're super excited to see what comes out of that. We have some core functionality that we're definitely doing, but this is like kind of some of what are those next features that you want. And with that, we are exactly at time, and it's been such a pleasure to be here with you, folks from all over the country, thousands of you, and it's always my joy to teach with my mom, and such a pleasure to be here with Wild Ones who are just, we work so closely with, and they're just so fantastic. So, thank you, everyone, and thank you, Mom.
Thank you, Zoe. Thank you, all of you. Thank you, Sarah and the team at Wild Ones. And I look forward to answering your questions.
All right. Bye, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.
Bye bye.